So yesterday we had seen one-dimensional array, two-dimensional arrays, and how we can like also create arrays with variable sizes of 2D arrays. Means when you want to create an array with uh, not specified the size of the inner arrays. Suppose uh, when you have multiple arrays and you don't want to restrict the size of your inner arrays, that is like this example we had taken yesterday. So where you have like created one Pascal's triangle, and basically the each of the individual arrays had a different size. So if you can see, the first array has a size of 1, the second array has a size of 2, the third array has a size of 3. And these arrays are zero index based. And so you also can basically find the size of each of the arrays by using the length function. So if you basically use a reference variable dot length, means whatever reference variable you have, suppose this is the reference variable for this array, Pascal's triangle dot length. It will give you the length. So the length will be basically 4. And if you find out the individual array's length, so suppose you want to find out the individual array's length. So suppose say 4, 5. So this comes at index 1. So array 1 dot length. So you provide the index in array 1 dot length. So it will basically give you 2. So these were the things we covered. We also covered, we started with classes and objects yesterday. And this is very important. This is one of the most integral things that you should understand. So uh, try to like focus as much as today, because this is very important topic. And we had started with some concepts yesterday, like with objects and classes. So objects are basically like real world entities which basically have some kind of attributes, some states, and those states and attributes are basically represented by the instance variables. So suppose we have something called a bank or a student or a car. So those will have some attributes, right? Suppose a bank has some name, and in the bank you basically want to compute some kind of like current balance for a person. So this was one of the simple examples we saw yesterday. So uh, and these are basically methods. These are basically methods. So methods are basically used to show behaviors. So these ID name and current balance, these are instance or non-static variables. So these are attributes of class. And basically this method is showing behavior of class. I'm just documenting everything. Instead means I'm just documenting these things in adjacent to those comments which we wrote yesterday, so that you can like understand. Even if you go through this file, you will have some understanding like what are these things. So I've clearly mentioned that ID name and current balance, these are basically instance or non-static variables. So we'll come to like what is static and what is like non-static. So instance variables, for now understand that this ID name current balance, these are basically instance variables. And instance variables can be basically accessed when we basically create the object of the class. So when we uh, try to like refer to these instance variables, we will basically create the object. So see, there were three methods which we created: one for depositing amount in your bank, one for withdrawing amount in the bank, and one for getting the current balance. And return keyword, this return keyword is supposed to basically return your value from a method. And what void does, void is a void means no return type. So if you call this method, if you call this method deposit, it will perform some operation, but this will not return you any value. But if you call this method, if you call get current balance, it will basically provide you a float value, a float value. So this is basically the data type. So this is the signature of a method. Uh, We'll add some more things to the method, but for now, you can see that the signature or syntax of a method is data type, space, method name, followed by parenthesis. And in the parenthesis, you can basically take some kind of parameters. So with these parameters, you can do certain types of computations or calculations in the method. So try to like keep the methods or attribute names as meaningful as possible. So people should basically see your class and understand what you're trying to perform. So if I see this class, I can like basically see that this is current balance. The current balance is initially 0. And then I'm trying to create a method. This method is deposit method. So when I say this deposit method, I'm taking a parameter. So what amount I need to deposit to your existing current balance? What amount I need to basically deposit in your account? So I'm depositing, say, this amount AMT variable contains, suppose, 100 rupees, and your initial balance was 0. So 0 plus 100. So your current balance is now 100. Now, similarly, you can have another method where you can basically withdraw some amount from the bank. So you have passed one parameter here, you have passed one you have passed one variable here. This amount will hold some value. So you are deducting some amount from your initial current balance. So 100 minus, say this AMT is now passed a value of 20. So your current balance becomes 80 and float get current balance. So if you do return current balance, so whatever your current balance is, it will be returned. So anyone has any confusion in this? So how do we, now we have created these methods. We have created these methods, we have created these instance variables, which basically explicitly show like the attributes of the class. These instance variables show attributes of the class. And these methods show the behavior of a class. So how do we basically access these methods now? We have created these methods, but this amount and these things should be passed some value, right? So how do we basically access these things? So we create an object. And how we basically create an object? This is the syntax. Class name, class name, followed by reference variable is equal to new. This new operator, creating an object, I will just document something here. New keyword helps to create an object. So this is a new keyword. New keyword is basically a Java keyword. It has specific meaning that it is used to create an object. And then again, we pass class name here. When we pass class name, it would be followed by parenthesis. So using this reference variable now, using this reference variable, we would be basically calling the methods. So, or we can like assign some values to your instance variables as well. We can also do something like bank dot current balance is equal to, we can also do something like bank dot current balance equal to something, say 200 f. We can do these things. So as of now, I'm not doing this, but it can be done. You can access your states or the instance variables in this manner as well. And you will be basically calling your deposit method. You will be passing some parameter. This is the amount which you want to deposit to your account. So you are printing out your current balance. You can print out this way as well, bank dot current balance, because you can access your instance variables with the reference variable. And then what we are doing, we are withdrawing some amount from your bank dot withdraw this particular amount. And then again, we are like trying to access the current balance. So current balance is again the instance variable. So it can be accessed with the reference variable dot current balance. And I've created a method. I've created a method to basically access, get the current balance. So if you call this method bank dot get current balance, what this method is returning, this method is basically returning me a current balance. That is why we have kept this data type as float, because current value was assigned a data type of float. So whatever data type you want to return from your method, means you are expecting some kind of decimal value or float value or integer value. So that is the data type which you need to mention in before your method name. So I know that my current balance is a float variable. So basically I'll assign a float return type. This is basically float is called a return type here. Syntax is return type, return type, method name, then parameters, followed by opening curly braces. So this is the syntax of a method. Everyone clear with this? This is very important. Anyone has any confusion in this? Okay, I'll take that as no. I'll proceed further. So we had seen these things as of now. So we had uh, seen how basically we can create a class, how we can basically create methods, and what are instance variables, and how we can basically create an object, how we can try to access those methods, how we can try to access the instance variables. So these things like are already covered. Now,
We'll call back, huh?
sorry. Okay. Yeah. So we'll see what is basically access control. Access control or basically access modifier. So access modifiers basically help to restrict the scope of a class, scope of a class or scope of a constructor or variable method or data member. So see, your class can have a method, it can have certain variables, it can have a constructor. We'll see what constructor is in some time. So basically your class can have a constructor, a variable, a method. So you want to provide some kind of security to this. So if you have written some methods, if you want to if you have written some variables in your class, you want to like provide some security such that some it's not accessed anywhere. The accessibility is restricted. uh, Means you want these variables or these methods to be used only in a certain file. You are basically restricting due to some security reasons. So how do you do that? So for that purpose, basically access modifier or access control comes in play. So there are basically four access controls in Java. So one is private, one is public, then protected, and then package or default. So basically, what is basically private access specifier? So when we say something is private, so the private access modifier is basically restricting your instance variables or the methods that you have created in a class to be in the same class. Means any other class cannot basically access these private methods or private variables that you have created. So let's come to next. We'll see all this in demo as well. So let's see what is your second access modifier. So it is public. So sometimes you might want to expose your methods to outside class as well, and you want to like so you can have like different n number of packages in your class, and all the packages can have some classes. I've already shown you how we basically create a package, and each package can have some classes. So suppose you created some you created some class where you have created one account, and you want that this account information be visible to all the other classes. So what you can do is you can basically mark the class as public. So when you basically mark the class as public, it is accessible to all the classes in the other packages as well. So whatever classes are there in other packages as well can access these methods or variables. So this public access modifier has the widest scope. So when you want your methods or variables to be accessed anywhere, you can basically mark the variables or you can basically mark the class as public. So this public will help in accessing it anywhere. So let's come to next access control. Next access control is basically protected. So what I mean by protected is, so suppose you have two packages, package P1 and package P2. So there is some concept of inheritance also, which we'll see in some time. Before that, I'll so let's say you have two uh, packages, package P1 and package P2. Package P1 contains class A, package P2 contains class B. So suppose you have marked your one of the methods as protected, one of the methods in class A, package P1 as protected. Now, what you basically want, you want it to be accessed in other package, uh, in some class in other package. So basically, what you want to do is you want to extend this class. You want to basically extend this class and import this package in other package. I'll show you how we basically do. So for simpler terms, this accessibility is basically more than default and less than public. Let's say, and let's come to what is default package. So default package is in a package, in a package, you can have like certain classes. So default access specifier basically tells you that it is like accessible in the class itself, and it is accessible to other classes in within the same package. So if you have marked something as default, it will be available within the package. Within the package to all the other classes, it will be accessible. So these are basically the four access controls. So let's see one by one. I'll show you the demo. When I show you the demo, then it will be like more clear. Let me create a I'll create a new package, access modifiers, access modifier, invalid package. Access modifiers dot p1. I will create another package, access modifiers dot p2. Now let's say I've created one class here. Let me name this class as so I'm trying to so first I will show you what is default access modifier. So I'll create a class. Let's name the class as student. So you have something as public class student. So let me do one thing. Let me remove this public thing. So by default, whenever you created some file from here, when you create a new Java class, it was like creating a class as it was automatically creating this class for you, right? When you provide the class name. So it was basically creating public class name. So I'm removing that public. So see, now what is the syntax? Class keyword and followed by the class name. So if there is nothing before the class keyword, so if there is basically nothing before the class keyword, that means it has got no access modifier. This has got no access modifier. And when there is no access modifier, this is supposed to be called a default access modifier. This is default access modifier, or this is also called default or package access modifier, package level access modifier. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and try to create a method. Welcome to Java training. And now what I basically want to do, I want to go ahead and create something in package P2. So this is a different package. P1 is one package where I've created a student class and I have created one method. And this is like having default access modifier. I've created one method which is void display, and I'm trying to print out some comments. Now what I'm basically doing, I'm creating another class. I'm creating student. I'm creating another class in this P2 package. So let me try to remove this public. So this is also a default access modifier, right? Default access modifier. So now what I will do, I will try to create a main method. I'll try to create a main method and I will try to import just So you all can see this package name here, right? So my student class was in package this. So you see this package keyword, right? After this package, this is the package name. So when I want to basically access the student class in teacher class, so what happens, this is in a different package. So what I will need to do, I will need to basically import this package. So there's an import keyword. So import keyword can basically help to import your all the files, all the classes in some package, or some specific classes as well. So after this class name, you can basically put a dot star semicolon. So what it means is that all the classes should be basically accessible in this package. But what happens? What I taught you for this default access modifier, are the default access modifier available to other packages? It's not, right? Because default access modifier is basically default access modifier allows access only at package level. So see, this is a default class and this is another default class. This both these classes are in different packages. This is in package P1, this is in package P2, this teacher. And what I'm trying to do, I'm basically trying to access this student class within this teacher class. Is it possible? No. Why? Because both these classes are default, and default classes are basically default access modifier allows access only till the package level. So if I try to now basically go ahead and create the object of student here. One second. Student equal to new student. See, I'm getting an error, right? See, why I'm getting an error? See this, what this error is basically showing. Read this error. This error is very meaningful. This is basically showing how the access modifiers work. See, com.java training access modifiers.p1.student is not public in P1. It cannot be accessed from outside package. So if this class is not public, this class is only default or package. So it can be accessed by other class only here. So let me try to show you how it can be accessed. Let me try to create a teacher class here. Let me remove this one. This is also default class. Now what I will basically do, I would basically create a main method here. And now what I'm trying to do, student dot display. Okay. Let me try to comment out this one. Let me try to run this. Now we are able to print this. We are able to print this. Welcome to Java training. Why? Because this student class and this teacher class, these are within the same package. These are within the same package. So we are able to access the student class within this same package within this teacher class. Now, this teacher class in package P2, we saw this, right? If I uncomment this is throwing me compile time error. This is compile time error because default class cannot be accessed outside of package. Got it? So I'll comment this out, but this is for reference that any other class in other package will not be able to access the default classes. So that is why it is basically throwing a compile time error. Now let's see what is a private modifier. So when we mark something as private, let me go ahead and try to create a private method. Let's say a student has private void so I'm trying to just create a private method. This is a private method. See how we basically use the private keyword. So we have already seen in previous demo that how we created a method. There was a return type followed by the method name. This we had already seen. So now if we want to place some access modifier before the method name, so what we can do, we can place it here before the return type. So this is private void print details. So I'm trying to print something. Rahul is of age 30, works at IBM. Now what I will basically try to do, I'll basically try to access this in some other class within the same package as well. Let me try to see if I'm able to access this as or not. When I say student dot print details, student dot print details, I'm trying to access this. See what error I'm getting. Print detail has private access in this one. Let me try to copy this. So this is compile time error. And why is the compile time error? Because of this. Because print details has private access in this. So we had seen two things. We were able to access this method. We were able to access this method here.
Pritam,
Hello. Yes.
I can hear you.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Hey, Admasu, are you saying
I
anything?
was not hearing
Your
your
voice is
voice.
not very clear.
Yeah.
You're
No,
not
no,
hearing
now
my.
it's okay. It's okay. Go ahead.
Anyone else
Yes,
has
yes. Now
issue
it's
saying?
okay.
Okay. Yeah. So see, there was an issue. Sorry. We were trying to access these methods. This is a default method because there is no access modifier before this. So when there are no access modifiers before the class or before the method name, so it is called default. It is called a default access. So default methods and default classes will be accessible within the same package. See, when we created a student class, when we created a student class, uh, and we created a student class and we created two methods. One was a default method and another was a private method. Now, within the same package, I created another class, teacher class, and I created an object of student class. What I tried to do, I tried to access this default method. This default method was accessible. Why? Because default access helps in basically accessing at the same package level. So this was accessible. Now I am trying to basically access a private method in a in the same package. I'm trying to access this method, private method, in some other class. So it is showing me a compile time error. Why? Because this, whenever I term it anything as private, it can be accessed in only the same file. It can be accessed only within the student class. So if I go ahead, create a main method here, I create a student class here, student, student is equal to new student. See, I've created a class. Now, if I try to call this print details, I should be able to print this. I should be able to print this. See, Rahul is of age 30, works at IBM. So we have seen two of the access modifiers. One is default, one is private. So what private basically allows is, if you mark any method as private, if you mark any variable as private, it will be accessed only within the same class. Only within the same class. It won't be even accessed within the same package. Even in the same package, if you have a different class, your private methods will not be accessed. Its access is restricted within the class, within the same class where that method is defined. Now, we have seen another access modifier as well, that is default. So another what default access modifier allows is, it will allow the access in another class but within the same package. So whatever I declare, if I have some default methods or some default variables, it will be accessible to other classes but within the same package. In another package, if we have some other class, it won't be accessible. So we had seen, right, in package P2, this print details method was not accessible. So in package P2, this object itself was not available. Why? Because this has a this has a uh, default scope, that is, it is accessible within the same package. So these two access modifiers are clear to you. Okay, we'll move forward with the third package, the third access modifier, that is protected. So let me now go ahead and create a protected method. So protected, find find average. Suppose I am passing some marks and number of subjects. So what I can basically do is, I can compute the average. And how basically I'll compute the average? If you divide your total marks by the total number of subjects, you'll basically get the average, right? So I'm just doing some simple calculation. No need to worry about this maths, what I've written. So what I'm basically trying to display is if we can try to access this method outside, where and all we can try to access this. So average. So I will try to access this method find average outside. So see, this student class is in package P1. The student class is in package P1 and this find average method is of protected access. Okay. So this protected method, uh, let me try to show you where and all we can basically access this. So let me try to create an object. So within the same package, we have this student class and student dot find average. What I am trying to do is basically I will provide some marks 100. I will provide some marks like 250 and I'll provide some number of subjects like 3. And I am trying to double average. Okay, no problem. We'll remove this because this is not a return. This does not have a return type. Student dot find average. So this method was basically taking two parameters. One was marks, one was number of subjects. So what basically we do is we try to call that method. So this is easily accessible here. This protected is easily accessible here. So what protected basically does, it it will allow the access when I mark some method or some class as protected, it will be accessible within the same package or any subclass in a different package. So what I mean by subclass, I will tell you what basically we mean by subclass. So let's say this there was a class, another class, and this class is genius student. See, genius student is also a type of student. So what we'll basically see, this is in another package. This genius student is in another package P2 and this student is in package P1. Now this genius student will try to basically extend this student class. So extends student. So what we basically need to do, we basically also need to import this. Import P1 dot star. 1 second. Okay. Okay, okay. I got it. Why? Okay, okay. We will remove this thing. We'll create another class. Let me just go ahead and delete this. No issues about this. We'll try to create an employee employee class. Just remove this protected method here. Uh, Protected void display system.out.println. So employee details, employee name, Andrew, is 30. So I have something in this employee class, and this is a protected method. So protected access modifier. Now, what I will try to do, I'll create one bank employee class in another package. Now, what I will basically try to do is I will try to access the method I created in employee class. So first thing I will have to do, I will have to import that package using this. And now what I will do, I'll basically extend an employee. So extend keyword helps in inheritance of a parent class. So I'll teach you this inheritance concept in detail, but for now, understand that if if you have if there's a parent and a student, sorry, if there's a parent and a son, so what basically is the relationship? The son will inherit some qualities from his parent, from his father or his mother. So basically, the parent would be a parent class and son would be a inheriting class or a derived class. So it's like de- a parent to son relationship. So the son will definitely inherit some of the qualities from the parent. So means this is some kind of inheritance relationship. So similarly, when I say public class bank employee extends employee, so bank employee is definitely an employee, right? So that is why we are basically extending this employee class. So these we need to do if we want to access anything from this employee class. So extend keywords helps in inheritance of a parent class properties or behaviors. Now what I will try to do is I will try to create a main method. I will try to create an employee object, and now what I will basically do, employee Okay. Protected. Okay, sorry. So I'll basically create a bank employee, employee dot display. Let me try to run this. Oh, what was this? Error student dot find average. Did I just delete something from here? Undo create method. I think I deleted something from there, right? Oh, I was trying to delete something else and I deleted something else. Okay. Okay, fine. See, now what happens? I have an employee class, I have a protected method, and I'm printing some employee details. And after that, what I'm basically doing in a different package, I have some bank employee class. And this bank employee class is basically a child class. Employee is a parent class, bank employee is a child class. Why? Because this class is basically extending employee class. When we say extends employee, it means that this is our parent class, employee class is the parent class, and bank employees class is basically the child class. So this extend keywords helps in inheritance of a parent class properties or behaviors. So whatever property parent has, the child will have. So now what I'm basically doing, I'm creating the object of this bank employee class and I'm trying to access the display method. See, I'm creating the object of this bank employee class and I'm trying to call this display method. So this display method is in employee class. I will still be able to access this. So what it means is protected keyword basically helps you in access of any class within the same package. So this protected method will be accessible to all the classes within the same package as well. And also it will be available to any class in other package, but the condition is that the class should basically extend the parent class. So this bank employee class is basically a subclass of employee class. So this is the condition. So we have seen three access modifiers until now. One is private, another is default, and then there is protected. Now, next is public. So if I talk about public void print hello world. Now, even if I try to create the object of employee here, employee equal to new employee e dot print. See, we are able to print hello world. So public access modifier, whenever I make any method or any class or any variable as public, so this will have the widest scope. Means this method, or if I mark any variable as public, this will be accessible within the same class, within all the other classes in the same package, and within any other class of a different package as well. So here, this bank employee or this teacher class will be able to print this here. So this is the thing. So public has the widest scope, and default has scope at the package level. Protected has scope within this package and outside of the package. But outside of the package, to protect to use to access any protected variable or protected method, you need to use a subclass. Now there was private. So private can only be accessed within the same class. Okay, TJ was asking some question. Can a private method can have more than one public default class in the same package? Okay. Can a private method can have more than one public default class in the same package? I think TJ, your question is not very clear. Means you can have a the same private method. Can a private method can have more than one public default class in the same package? Means within the same package, if there is a public or default class, you can create the same private method. Yeah, you can create a same private method. There is no issue about that. Means you mark any class as public or you mark any class as default, then you can have the same private method in both the classes. There's no issue in that. You can even use inheritance or subclass to access that method because it's in the same package. See, public or default will definitely be accessible within the same package. So if you are trying to uh, access a private, oh, this is private method, right? Okay, sorry. And you're trying to access a public. No, no, sorry, my bad. You have a public and default class and you are trying to access a private method. So this private method will not be accessible. No, private method, if your method is private, it will be accessible only in the same class, nowhere else. Sorry, my bad. Uh, because your even if your class is public or default, your private method will not be accessible in other class in the same package as well. Because private has the least scope of visibility. TJ, you are okay with this? Did you understand? Yeah. So private method will not be accessible even if the class is public or default. Why? Because your method was private, your method was private, so it will not be accessible in any other file, even in the same package, even if the access specifier is marked public or default, it will not be accessible. Okay, so this was about access modifiers. This is very important because when you understand the access modifiers very clearly, only then you will understand how your methods can be accessed within the package, outside of your package, within the same class, and you will basically understand where to use which access modifier. So I will just reiterate once more. We have like four access modifiers. Private. So when I term anything as private, when I term anything as private, so basically I mean that that can be accessed within the same class. Within the same class, and it cannot be accessed even in the same package of other class. It can be only accessed within the same class. So private has the least scope. Now comes your default scope. So default scope has default means package level. So this has more scope than private. So default, if I mark any method or any class as default, it will be accessible within the package. Within the package, any class can basically access this. So this has more visibility or more scope, more access than private. Now comes protected. Protected has even a little higher scope than your default. So protected, if I mark anything as protected, it would be accessible within the same package, and it would be accessible to any other subclass of other package. Other package class can access this, but the condition is that it should be a subclass of the parent class. So protected has more scope or access than your default. Now comes public. When I term anything as public, so this has the highest scope. So when I mark anything as public, that particular method or that particular variable will be accessible anywhere, even outside of the package as well. So that has the greatest scope. So this was basically about your access modifiers. Now let's see fields and methods. So I've already shown you this example yesterday where we created a bank class and we had seen the methods to deposit, withdraw, and get current balance. And basically, these are also called like the ID, current balance, and name. These are basically called as fields or instance variables. Also, you can call this fields, instance variables, or non-static variables. You can call this anything. And these are the methods. Basically, your deposit is a method, withdraw is another method, and current balance is another method. So this example we have already seen. Now, what is overloading? So in Java, there's a concept called method overloading, and we have some concept of overriding as well. But first, we'll talk about overloading. So you might get certain scenarios where you want to perform the same operation. You want to perform basically the same operation, but for different set of data types. But for different set of data types. So in that case, what you basically do, you can basically have method overloading. You can apply the method overloading concept. So see, in Java, a class can have two or more different methods with the same name, provided their signature is different. The signature of a method is its name together with the number order and types of its parameters. This feature of having multiple methods with the same name but different signatures is known as overloading. So You can have multiple methods. Suppose you have created one add method to add two numbers. In a class, you have created an add method for adding two numbers. So you have created one public int add integer int num1 num2, and you are adding that. So next is, you are creating the same method again to add some kind of float numbers or some double numbers. So you can do that. So this feature of having multiple methods with the same name but different signatures is known as overloading. When you call a method, the compiler determines the actual method to invoke based on the number of types of parameters supplied by you. So let's see the example. So this is an example of method overloading. See what we are basically doing. We have public void add method. So basically, if you can see, this add method is created three times. So the first time, what it basically does, it takes two integer parameters. It takes two integer parameters. It adds those two numbers and prints out the sum of those two numbers. Next add method, what it basically does, it basically takes three integer numbers, it prints out the sum of those three numbers. And again, we have another add method where basically we have two float numbers and where we basically add the numbers and print out the sum. So can you see that all these three methods have the same name as add? We can have this in Java. So why we are basically doing? We are basically trying to perform the same operation. We are trying to perform the same operation, addition, but for a different set of parameters. For a different set of parameters. So see, in the first method and the second method, what is different? The first method takes two parameters. The second method takes three parameters. So the number of parameters varies. First has two parameters, second method has three parameters. So that is basically the difference. So you can create these two methods. So this is called as method overloading. Now see, the first method has two integer parameters. The third method has two float parameters. Both the methods basically perform addition itself, but the type of parameter is now different. So either the number of parameters should be different or the type of parameters should be different or the data type of the parameter should be different. Then you can basically create the methods with the same name. So this is called as method overloading. So we'll try to basically see this example. I'll create a new package. I'll create a new package. I will name us overloading. I will name it as method overloading. Okay, let me not make it as method overloading. Overloading. I'll create another sub package as method overloading dot method. And now I'll create a example. I'll create a class where I basically perform an addition. What I will basically do, I'll create a method where I basically add to integer numbers sum of see. Now when I have created the same method exactly, it started giving error, right? Java compiler will throw an error. Why? Because the same method is created exactly. Means we have the same add method with the same data type and same number of parameters. So if we try to like create something like this, Java compiler will throw an error. So how we basically can overload this add method? How we basically can overload this add method? We can add one more integer parameter here. Let's go ahead and add one more parameter. See, the error went away, right? Can you all see the error went away? If I again go ahead and remove this, we are getting this error. So to overload this method again, what we basically can do, we can increase one more parameter. And then what I can basically do here, I can, so sum of A, B and C is equal to A plus B plus C. Now, this is an example of method overloading. Now, what we basically can do, there is another thing also we can see, like we can also perform something like this. Now, again, see, again, I have copied the exact same method. This is throwing an error. Now, what we can do, we can try to change the data type. Let's make this as float or let's make this as double A and double B. Sum of A and B is equal to A plus B. Now let's go ahead and create a object of this class. So basically class name reference variable is equal to new class name parenthesis. So now what I will basically do, add, see, when I do reference variable dot, you are getting suggestions for all these three methods, right? You are basically getting suggestions for all these three methods. So what that basically means, Java compiler tells you that you provide me the data type, you provide me the parameter, I will basically go ahead and recognize which method I need to call. So when I basically pass 3 comma 5, anyone from here, which method will be called, which add method will be called? Is it first, second, or third? I am passing two parameters, integer parameters. One is 3, one is 5. Which method will be basically called? Yes, TJ has answered it 1. So basically, the first method will be called. Why? Because this has two integer parameters. So this is why, that is why this will be called. Now let's go ahead and pass three parameters, 1 comma 2 comma 3. Which method will be basically called? So in this case, basically your second method will be called. Are you guys understanding this? Now let me go ahead and pass some double value like 2 comma so 10 comma 0. So in this case, the third method will be called. Why? Because I'm passing two double variables. Now let me try to go ahead and run this. Sum of 3 and 5 is equal to 8. See, sum of 3 and 5 is equal to 8. Sum of 1, 2 and 3 is equal to 6. 1, 2 and 3 is equal to 6. And then sum of 2 and 10 is equal to 12. So see this output. So the first time when I passed this 3 and 5, the first method got called. Why? Because I have passed two integer data types. I have passed two integer parameters. So with this signature, the Java compiler is basically able to understand that I need to invoke this method. So it was able to call this method and perform the sum operation. Now, when I pass three integer integer parameters, so this add method was called and this print statement got executed. Now, when I'm basically passing two double variables, so this particular method is being called and I'm able to get the sum of two double numbers. Is it clear? Is method overloading concept clear? Okay. Okay. Now we'll see constructors. What is basically constructor? So constructors are also similar to methods. So you have seen how we can basically create method and how we can like perform some operations within the methods. So constructors are also similar to methods, but there are some differences in constructors. So why basically we use constructors in Java? Constructors are basically used to initialize any object immediately on its creation. So we have seen how we basically create an object, right? We can create an object with something like this. Class name, reference variable is equal to new class name followed by parenthesis. So whenever you do something like this, your constructor will be invoked. We'll see the demo as well, but let's see. Constructors are used to initialize an object immediately on its creation. So suppose your constructor has some parameters. So once your object gets created, all those data members will be initialized with some value. I will show you how that is done. So next is a class can have a constructor which forms a block of statements which are to be executed when an object of the class is to be created. A constructor is typically used to initialize the state of an object. A constructor is a function that has the same name as the class that is initializes. So Suppose I want to create a constructor of this addition method. So the constructor name has to be exactly addition. You will be having basically the same name as that of the class name. So constructor has the same name as the class name. So this is one important thing. This is a difference from methods as well. In methods, you can have the name as anything, but when you create a constructor, the constructor name has the same name as that of a class name. And next thing is, uh, like other methods, a constructor can receive parameters but cannot return anything. Yes. So you saw that in the previous example, a method was taking some parameters. We were passing some parameters to the methods. So constructors can also take parameters. Constructors can also take parameters, but constructors can never return a value. Your methods can return a value, right? If you make this data type from void to suppose say integer, so you can return some value, but your constructor will never return a value. That has always a void return type. So constructor will never return a sorry, constructor will not even return a void value. It is just used for initializing. So the basic application of this constructor is when you create some class, when you are creating some project, you might want to initialize your data members with some value. Suppose you have created one employee class. An employee has some attributes. Say an employee has a name, he has age, he has got some salary, he works in some department. So your employee class has name, age, salary, and department. So these are basically the attributes of an employee. So what you want to do now, you want to like provide some parameters. You want to like initialize your class. You want to initialize this data members with some value. So what you can basically do, you can create a employee constructor. In that constructor, you pass all these four parameters where you basically initialize them. And once you create the object of this class and pass some values, in your object, you basically pass the name, age, you pass the salary, and you pass the department. So once your object is created, your constructor is automatically initialized with those values. So that is the basic application of this constructor. So the constructor of a class is automatically called when an object of the class is created. So one more thing, if the constructor is not provided by the user, then the compiler automatically provides one for you, which is a no argument constructor and initializes all instance variables to three default values. See, you can have one default constructor, one you can have like one parameterized constructor as well. So what happens when you do not create any constructor? So Java explicitly means it creates a constructor for you with no arguments. Means there's something as default constructor already created for you. So if you if you basically have your instance variable created and you do not create any constructor, so what will happen is that Java compiler basically creates a default constructor for you and it initializes those instance variables to the default value. But as soon as you create any parameterized constructor, as soon as you create any parameterized constructor, you will have to basically provide some values for initialization. So that is the thing. So we'll go ahead with the demo. Okay, we'll create another package as constructor. Okay, let me create the same example, or let me create an employee class. So see, now the employee can have some kind of ID. Let's say I've created one ID, private and ID. So the employee has an ID, employee has a name, private string name, employee has got some salary, and the employee works in some particular department. Let me create one main method here, and then I'll go ahead and let me try to print employee ID. Employee, I'm creating an object as well. Employee equal to new employee. Employee dot ID. Let me try to run this. See, how do you think this employee dot ID got a value of 0? We did not provide any value to this, right? We did not provide any value to this. So what happens in the background is like Java compiler basically creates a default constructor for you. When you don't create any constructor, right? Your Java compiler basically creates a default constructor for you. And when you when the default constructor is created, so this id is of data type integer, and integer has a default value of 0. We know this, right? So this this instance variable was initialized with the default value. So employee.id was basically having the value of 0. So why? Because this instance variable is of data type integer, and integer has a default value of 0. So similarly, if I print out the salary, if I print out the salary now, it would be basically 0 0.0. So this is one thing. Now what I will basically do, I will try to create a constructor. I'll so when I create a constructor, so I'll make it as public, and it would have the same name of the class name, and I will provide anti id string name double salary string department. Now see, this is a parameterized constructor. I can also create something like public employee. So this is an example of default constructor. Default constructor. So default constructor, this takes two parameters, and this is parameterized constructor, takes parameters to initialize the instance variables or the data members. So these are basically ID, name, salary, and department. These are basically your instance variables or data members or non-static variables. Try to try to basically learn what are the terms we basically refer this. So next time when I say non-static variable or instance variable or data members, you basically know that I'm talking about these variables. So now this is a default constructor. So in this default constructor, I have not passed anything. So here I can basically mark it as id equal to, I can provide something like id equal to 3, name equal to John, salary is equal to 200, department is equal to finance. So I've created something like this. Now what happens? I'm trying to initialize this. So I'll tell you why I'm basically doing this dot id, this dot name, this dot salary is equal to this dot department is equal to department. Now, now when I try to create an object on of an employee, see initially when I printed this employee dot id, I was getting employee id 0. Now there's a default constructor created public employee. So now if I run this, see the employee ID is 3 now. Why? Because I have created one default constructor now. I've created one default constructor now, which takes no parameters, and I have assigned the value of ID to 3. I have assigned this instance variable ID to a value of 3. So now that when I create this object, when I create this object, upon object creation, upon object creation, default constructor at line 11 gets called. Why? Because see, when I call this employee equal to new employee, I'm not passing any parameters, right? I'm not passing any parameters. So when I don't pass any parameters, it will call the default constructor. It will call this. So w- so when the default constructor is basically called, all these data members are basically initialized with these values now, with these values that I'm using. So now when I use this reference to print the ID of the employee, so basically it will print 3. Why? Because we have initialized ID with a value of 3. Now let's go ahead and create I'll try to create another object now, and this time I will basically employ to, I will try to basically create another. Now this time I'm passing parameters. So now let me try to print out the details. So let me try to run this program now. See, okay, we have some issue here. Registered ID. Okay, employee dot. Okay, okay. This would be employee two. This would be employee two. Okay. So now that I'm trying to print this default constructor, when I create something, when I create the object something like this, employee equal to new employee without passing any parameters. So what it does upon object creation, default constructor at line 11 gets called. Why? Because this default constructor does not have any parameters, and all these data members will be initialized with these values. So when I print these details now, so whatever values were initialized in the default constructor will be printed. Now again, I've created one parameterized constructor. So when I create a parameterized constructor, I'm basically passing the parameters here upon object creation. So upon object creation, here parameterized constructor will be called. And this parameterized constructor is at line 18. So this is basically getting called. So TJ, your string name will have a default value of null. If you don't provide anything, if you do not initialize anything in your default constructor, it would have a default value of null because the string has a default value of null. So that is why. So this is about your parameterized constructor, and this is about your default constructor. There is also one constructor that is like copy constructor. So let me show you that as well, how we basically create a copy constructor. Okay, is it must to give pass all parameters to the parameterized constructor. So if I don't pass any parameterized constructor, parameters to the parameterized constructor, so what will happen? That will throw a error. Why? Because let me show you now. When I don't pass ID, right? So that parameterized constructor is basically expecting for an argument, or it is expecting for a parameter. So that will throw a compile time error. So that's why you have to basically pass all the parameters. Is your query clear, TJ? I think that should be clear, right? Okay. So there is another type of constructor. There is another type of constructor, that is copy constructor. So when I say by copy constructor, what I mean is basically I would pass a reference of the class itself. Reference of the class itself. So how it means is I would create a constructor by using public class name, and then what I would basically pass, I would pass the reference of the employee itself. See, this is employee class and this is employee reference. And then what I will basically do, this is basically a copy constructor. So let me, so we can basically pass something, some values here. I can basically pass, uh, so we can pass something like this. So this is basically a copy constructor. See, in copy constructor, what I have basically done, I have basically passed the reference of the class itself. So how do I basically call this? I would basically try to create another object. Employee 3 is equal to new employee. Now let me try to pass employee 2 here. And this would be a copy constructor. And then again, I would try to print employee 3 dot id, employee 3 dot name, employee 3 dot salary, employee 3 dot department. Let me try to run this. Okay, see, this is one thing. So see, I have passed this keyword, and with this keyword, basically what I am trying to do, I'm passing these values. I'm passing these values 10, Chandler, 300, and movies. And you can pass any employee reference here. You can pass any employee reference here in this new employee when you create the object. But the object creation, the object creation will be basically we are passing these values. So this will basically print these values like whatever we passed in the this argument in the copy constructor. So these are the three types of constructors that we have to go through. One is default constructor, one is parameterized constructor, and other is copy constructor. So default constructor basically this does not take any argument. Parameterized constructor basically takes arguments and it is used to initialize your data members. And then copy constructor. Copy constructor is basically used for taking the class as a reference. So basically you can take the class as a reference and you can pass using this keyword, you can basically pass the arguments here. So this is basically about constructors. I will give you some assignment as well today on constructors. Kindly do those assignments. Means I had also given some assignments in the last class and the previous class as well, but I don't see you guys are like completing those assignments. So if you don't take interest in completing those assignments, your hands-on will become a bit weak. So you will have knowledge of the concepts, but when you try to like implement it, you might like forget things. So try to like practice those assignments, so that will be like very helpful for you. I don't give like a lot of assignments. Those are generally 2 to 3 assignments, and those are like very small assignments. If you have gone through the class, if you have gone through the lectures, that would be very easy for you to basically grab those concepts. Okay, so we have seen these constructors. So there are like a lot of concepts still left in classes and objects. Would you mind if I still take like 15 minutes? Is it fine for you or is it like too late for you? Let me know. We can like
Hey, Pritam, it is my sleep time, please.
okay, let's stop the class here today.
Thank you.
So I'll provide one assignment uh, based on constructors. So kindly go ahead and try to complete that. And today we covered a lot of concepts on classes and objects. We saw method overloading. We also saw access modifiers, and we also saw this constructors, default constructors, parameterized constructors, copy constructors. I'll give you some exercises today, so kindly try to go ahead and try to complete that. So next class will resume on Tuesday EST 9:30 p.m. That would be Wednesday 8 a.m. for IST folks, and Tuesday 9:30 p.m. for EST. So I'll stop the recording now